thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Emily and I have known each other for a while.
I don't even know when we met or how.
Yeah.
But we've had many conversations about painting, been to each other's studios, and it's a pleasure. So thank you for inviting me, Tamar. I appreciate it. It's nice to see everybody here. And you know, as you know, Tamar's very articulate about her own work, so I don't have to say very much. So what we've talked about it, we've discussed this, and we're going to start by talking about the title of the show, which is Standing in the Stream. And I think it's a very evocative title, as are the paintings and the drawings. And I think that the title itself will lead us in a lot of different directions. It references nature, time, change, movement, the paintings and the drawings. And I thought maybe we could start by, you might want to elaborate a little bit about what that title means to you. And the paintings. We're going to start by talking about the paintings. We're going to get to the drawings later.
Before we even get to the paintings, I want to give a little background on where that phrase, standing at the stream, came from. So I am a beginning student into Buddhist philosophy in a very informal way, but standing in the stream is a reference to being open to all of our experiences, both outward, in nature, other people, and inward, what we sense in our bodies. And sometimes in Buddhism, or some aspects of Buddhism, standing in the stream is something that's necessary to eventually attain enlightenment. I don't have any pretensions to ever attain that, but for me, it's about being very awake. And so if we start with the paintings, the paintings for me are meant to summon up sensation, what we might experience when we're in nature. So they're not meant to be descriptive so much as maybe evoke movement of the wind through the trees. I'm looking at the two kind of blue-green ones, maybe to evoke the cool dampness of being in an area of forest. Also, perhaps passage of time that you have in the triptych. So, my experiences in nature is that I tend to notice one thing at a time, be aware of one thing at a time as I'm going on a walk, standing somewhere. It may really be about the light, or I'll feel the wind. And what I wanted to do in these paintings was bring in multiple sensations that kind of come and go. So, and that's also a connection to Buddhist philosophy, is the notion of impermanence, that everything is in a state of change. So I wanted to capture bits of those changes and bring them into the paintings, because that kind of mirrors my experience of being in nature.
Well, you're saying everything I was going to say next. So I knew that would happen. Okay, so yes, because one of the things you said, and I'm quoting, is that you're capturing the energy and sensation of a fleeting moment in the stream of time. So you are talking about impermanence, you're talking about change. You also say there's a risk of unknowing what will happen. And I think that's really interesting concept, and I think it relates to life, it relates to being in nature, and it relates to painting. It certainly relates to your painting. So I thought maybe you could talk about that in terms of your process.
Okay. So the risk of unknowing. My work always starts by having no idea, no particular intention. I have a vocabulary, I have a sensibility, but I have no idea where a painting is going to end up. And usually if I try to direct what I'm doing in a particular way, I end up in tremendous struggle with the painting, because the paintings, they're in charge really, not me, and that's the kind of unknowing. So the paintings start, they're very slow, taking many, many months, a lot of layers. The paintings start with very loose washes of color. Sometimes it may be because I have mixed up a lot of paint from another painting, and I just want to use it up, and I want to have something to react to. Other times I may have a very loose sense of a palette, you know, warm or cool, but so they'll be very loosely brushed, no forms, just kind of a messy openness. And then there'll be, I may go back into it when it's wet or another time when it's dry with some very loose lines. And there'll be layer upon layer where I'm alternating kind of loose brushwork with adding lines and covering them. And the unknowing is because I'm waiting for that moment when the painting begins to give me a direction, for me to start following, and I'll start following something because it seems to be suggesting some sensation to me, and I'll start following something, and then I'll get distracted, and then I'll completely lose what I was so infatuated with. So I stumble around until things begin to coalesce, and I don't know that I can.
You're improvising,
Yeah.
you're working on the painting is talking to you, you're talking back. And I was thinking, even when I came in here, I was the first person here. It was really nice just to be here with the work all alone. And, you know, these paintings, I think the more you look at them, the more you see. So the fact that you're working so slowly, there's this slow process where you're building up the color and the layers, and things are shifting around. I mean, you have the same, I think, so you convey those sensations to the viewer. So when I'm looking at the painting, that's, I want to look slowly, and I want to really kind of, you almost feel that you're being drawn in, so you're standing in the stream as well. And I don't mean an actual stream, but you're standing there in the painting, you're really pulling people in. And one thing that I think is kind of an interesting thing to talk about in these paintings is the way that you're using these linear marks on the surface, because I think they do different things in different paintings, that they lead your eye. And sometimes they seem more embedded, and other times more on top. And other times there's almost a perspective, where they lead you back into the painting, and there's a kind of landscape feeling to it. But at the end, they're marks. They're painterly marks, and they're not like branches or whatever, reflections. I mean, they can suggest those things. But one thing I noticed, which I think is so beautiful on the triptych, was that some of the blue areas really come forward, and you left them on top rather than embedding them in the painting, and that sort of brings your attention back to the fact that it's a painting. But it's the color, choices are very beautiful. And to me, this triptych, and I think we were talking about this once, or somebody else was saying it too. To me, this one gives you the feeling that you're looking up. So some of them you're looking across, some of them you're looking in, and some of them, this feels like you're looking up. It's almost like a Tiepolo ceiling, and the marks, to me, become very almost figural. Does that ever occur to you?
Yeah, well, you said a lot to respond to, and I love all the associations that you're making, all the observations. So I'm trying to think where to begin. So that there is no clearly divine, clearly obvious perspective of where you are as a viewer is intentional. So ambiguity is a very important aspect of what I'm reaching for. I don't want the work to be descriptive of any particular place or any particular moment. It's about the sensations that you're noticing. And I love that you're mentioning Tiepolo in terms of that painting. Very, very, I posted a progress shot of that. This one took me about 2 years to get through. It went through so many changes. It was really, really struggling with it for a long time. And in an early stage, someone commented on the appearance of it and said, I expect there to be angels. Yeah, because it has that sense of looking up. And so here's maybe a little bit sideways move in terms of the looking up. So I spend a lot of time upstate, and some of it lying on my back when I'm exercising and looking through a window behind me up at the trees. And I've often been very captivated by the movement. So I'm there like doing exercise. But what I'm absorbed in is what I'm seeing out the window. And what I found as well is, so years ago, the references to nature were primarily about light, luminosity. And with this body of work, it became about very different sensations. And what I also started doing that made me realize that movement through the trees was so important, is when I'd be upstate, if it was a windy day, I was constantly like filming the movement of the leaves because I knew I wanted to capture that somehow. And then I realized, well, the video is moving, so of course I'm going to capture it. How am I going to get that into a painting, which is a still surface? And that was, I don't know how I did that, except that I knew that I wanted it somehow. And so that one is very much kind of a looking up, and others I think have a greater level of ambiguity to it. And one of the reasons the ambiguity is important to me is I don't want to define for someone who's engaging with the work what they see. Everyone brings their own way of seeing, their own experiences to it. And the title of the painting series is Unseen Voices, because I don't want to define for you what your experiences are. I'm sharing with you some of my experiences, but I'm not defining for you, is this water or is this distant or is it close? I want to leave that very, very much open.
Well, they do have this wonderful openness to them, and they like hint at different kinds of space. And also, you're using these different formats. So, with a triptych, of course, you're going to read it left to right. But then with those, because of the way they're painted, I think it still brings you back to that sense of they're all a piece.
It was painted right. I mean, it was painted all at once. But the rightmost panel. So anytime you work on one panel, then everything changes on everything else. And you need to. I need to change. So the rightmost panel began to assert itself before the other two, and based on what was happening there, I made dramatic changes to the other two. So for me, it was more of a in this particular one, a right to left. For, I mean,
Yeah.
for no particular reason,
You
it
can go
just,
back and forth with it, yeah.
yeah.
And then these with these very vertical ones have more of a feeling to me of like a scroll, of a, some kind of Chinese painting, or where it has that kind of perspective also, those kinds of landscapes.
I'm very fond of verticals, and have done quite a few works on paper, paintings on paper with this, and there's something about when I'm doing work that's about nature, of undermining the horizontality, which we tend to experience in nature. Yeah. So I think the vertical format gives me the possibility of it being all of one depth, but also pushing back at the same time, pushing back and forward. But I had to force myself not to do only verticals, because there's something that I just find so satisfying about that.
You're really exploring all these different formats.
But most of them are, that's I think the only, the triptych is a horizontal, but made up of a series of verticals. I think this is the only actual horizontal, because even the smaller pieces are all, they're vertical. I find that horizontals, I have to work against them feeling too stable and kind of square and just stuck there. So the vertical gives me, I think, that possibility of undermining it.
There's still, there's a lot to talk about in these pieces. One thing that I find very interesting, I've seen your work over time, and I'm sure other people here have too, where you had more of these sort of geometric shapes in your paintings. And here, they've almost entirely disappeared, but not completely. And it's very subtle. So you have, is there one in here? Yeah, on the top, right? And you see the line, and they change in terms of their width. So I think it has a sort of directional sense, where in this one over here is on the corner on the bottom right. And I think it has a couple different functions. Do you want to talk about that?
I would love to hear what
I have to say about it.
Okay, because this is something that I've been doing for a long time, and have such difficulty articulating why they need to be there. But if they're not, and then they go on very late in the process, but it's really hard for me to put into words why I need them.
Well, I think that they, for one thing, they bring you back again to the idea that this is a painting. That it's not a picture of a particular landscape. It's a painting, and it stops you. It stops the movement and the painting from going off the edge into infinity. So that creates, it's, like as a border, as a boundary. But also I think sometimes, because they're not like the same, it's not like you have the same border going all the way down the side. It gives you a little like push, kind of like push it this way or this way. That it could move almost like a piece of a sundial or something. I'm not saying it's one thing, but it gives me these different feelings. And in the other room, there are other examples of it, and where you put it in different places on the painting. I think it's one of those things that, to me, it's just, it's kind of the mystery of painting, that you don't know exactly why you're doing something, and it just feels right to you.
Yeah.
And I think it works very well, actually. And I like the subtlety. I like that you've gone that way, in that direction towards a more subtle bit of geometry there.
Yeah. It's those elements enter the painting very late in the process, and it's part of the unknowing in the process, because things go in and I kind of look, no, why would you put it there? Or it's the wrong color, or it's too wide, or it's leaning. I don't know what it should be until I find the right one. I put things in and then I wipe them off or sand them off, and
Well, we all do that, I think. Well, we don't all, but a lot
yeah,
of us do.
but I know that I need it, even if I can't articulate why, but some element along the edge, somewhere, that's been showing up in my work for several decades, even in the 80s and 90s when the work was more overtly landscape. I mean, the colors were not naturalistic, but it certainly read as landscape in that there were horizon lines. But I started putting things on the edges, scraping off. So I was working a lot in oil pastel, so that even though a drawing was maybe had a white border, the border of the paper was not enough to end the image somehow. I would scrape things off so that there was a hint of something, and I didn't know what that was doing for me, except that once I had an area like that, and sometimes it was on all four sides, so how I use it, as you've mentioned, has changed. I just knew that when I found the right configuration of a bit of geometry there, I could go, well, there it is. It was meant to be there. But when it's wrong, it just is so, I can't tell you or me why it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a sense of, because you have that there's sort of a sense of the painting being, I can't really explain it either, but like a presence, that because you kind of ended it, I mean, of course, the edges of the panels do that as well in any rectangle or any painting, but this is a little bit extra, and I think it's because of the kind of painting it is, it could read as part of a much larger whole. Mm-hmm. And of course you could still see it that way, but I think this kind of keeps it from doing that too much and becomes a presence as it is. The image is contained, it's contained. So you have this openness, but it's contained as well, which I think works really well. Which brings me back to color. I mean, you mentioned color again, and your color has changed a lot. And some of these colors are relating. They reference nature and the blues and the greens, or even the reds.
Well, they reference nature, but I don't think you'd find.
No.
You'd be hard pressed to find something that looked quite like that.
But do you feel like your color is going in that direction? For a particular, because of nature, or just for some other?
I'm not sure. It's not intentional so much as to achieve the sensations that I want to evoke. The way I was using color had to change, and in the two paintings on the back wall, the watery, maybe watery verticals, I was struggling with the greens for a very long time, and everything I never paint from the tube, everything gets mixed all over the place. And I didn't know what I needed, but I couldn't find it, and in my draw of paints of all the greens, and I had so many of them, but nothing was right. I ended up getting a few new colors that I had never worked with, and I can't tell you what they are, but greens that had seen, and I was, oh, I never use anything like that, and there were 2 or 3 like that, and I just started working with them, and thought, there it is.
Yeah.
So it was what I was trying to capture or evoke that moved the palette to where it is.
Well, and it looks like your color is also arising, as you paint, because of all the layering.
Yeah.
So there's areas of transparencies and areas where you're covering up what was underneath, and you're kind of mixing on
Yeah.
the panel.
Yeah, and the way I started working for this body of work, for the first time ever, I started keeping scrupulous notes of what I was doing, because I work on many paintings at the same time.
That's very smart.
I would have had no way of going back in and continuing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I started out trying to do that without knowing what pigments I had used, and so that was a bit of a disaster. So I started keeping very, I couldn't say precisely how much of this I mixed with that, but at least, okay.
You know what's in there.
I know it's in there.
It's very helpful if it gets damaged, you can go back and fix it. Right. So one thing I was thinking about is that, you've got all this, they're very evocative, as I said in the beginning. You've got water and reflections, but it does create this luminosity. You're saying you're kind of getting away from that, but they're incredibly luminous. And I think that because they're very slow and because there's something you really want to look at and be immersed in, they're immersive. So that, to me, brings up that feeling, which is, sometimes referred to as the sublime. I mean, it's beauty. It's a feeling of, you get a feeling of, like, when you're doing your exercises and you're looking up at the sky and branches and everything, you're getting this feeling of wonder and awe. Right? And I think that can be described as beauty. Yeah. And I think that, it's a loaded word. I mean, people sometimes want to stay away from the word beauty. But I know you said it's not something you think about. So it's just something you achieve, but it's not something you're thinking about.
So, yes, I don't generally talk about beauty, whether in my own work or other work. I tend more to respond from what is the sensation that what I'm seeing is evoking in me. So it's a bodily sensation, it's so I keep referring to those 2 blue-green verticals back there because they're right in front of me. And so I think where I'm trying to go is into spaces that I can lose myself. And to the extent that a sense of beauty is a goal or is even attainable, I think in any way in life, whether it's from a piece of music, watching a dance performance, walking at the ocean, it's an experience in which this will sound savvy, it's not that we merge with what's around us, but we lose ourselves because those sensations are so, they're not overwhelming, they're just expansive, so that we can get lost in them. And to bring it back a little to meditation, for me, experiences of that transcendence, that beauty, that wonder during meditation are extraordinarily rare, but when they've occurred, it's, just this experience, I want to stay here, And to the extent that so I know that a painting is finished when I lose myself in it.
There you go. I think that was so well said. I mean,
but I'm still uncomfortable with the word beauty.
I think that I feel like that. But I think all those things are part of the same thing. I think that's what people mean when you say something is beautiful. And the fact that you are becoming part of something larger than yourself, and so it's not all about your ego and your self-consciousness. And you kind of have to. There has to be an element of that, I think, when you're painting, because otherwise it just becomes very contrived and inauthentic for me. But I just found it's just something that I was thinking about. I actually read this interview with Marilyn Robinson, the writer, and it turns out she's very religious. I have no idea. I don't consider myself a religious person. I don't think you consider yourself a religious person. And I know some people will go into I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Okay, but I feel like it's the same impulse. No matter what word you use, I think it's the same impulse. I mean, it's just a feeling of losing yourself and of wonder and of awe. And, and I feel like that's part of what you're doing subject matter-wise. Anyway.
I'll take it.
And that's beauty. I mean, one thing she said in the interview, which I thought was really interesting, she said, well, people are afraid to use the word beauty, but, mathematicians don't have any problem using it. They'll say a formula is beautiful because it's right, because it works, because it's elegant, because, it's an economy of means, all those things, So, I don't think we should shy away from the word, personally. So I think maybe we should talk about the drawings. What do you think? So the drawings, they're very different from the paintings. And I think, obviously there's a very different kind of mark making going on here. We were talking about them. And one thing, that I feel is that the marks are much more aggressive, So there's a different kind of feeling in them. Of course you're doing some of the same things, and I think it's very interesting how you're doing these diptychs. And I don't know if maybe we want to talk about that along with the mark making. And your process, because I know your process with the drawings is different.
Very, very, very different. So I've been drawing alongside painting basically always, and making lines, the gesture. My love of it goes back to being a 12-year-old at the Art Students League and doing figure drawing. It was always the fast poses. If it was about a model sitting there for like a half hour, we're supposed to do what to me was a rendering. It's like totally tuned out. But the 30-second poses, all that was just very, very exciting to me because I could do that that's where I discovered a fluid line and just a joy and movement, and like moving my arm to capture something that was still. So where the paintings are slow and layered, the drawings are very fast. There's no thought. And I'm now kind of breathing in. It's kind of generated by my breath. So I know what materials I want to work with. I've used oil pastel for many decades. I love the feeling of it because I can make quick gestures and I can press harder. I can scrape it. I can manipulate it. So oil pastel, I've always enjoyed. And these are actually oil pastel on black Stonehenge paper, but there's also charcoal. I sometimes pounce the surface with a rag with charcoal. So the drawings come from breath and come from something very deep inside. And for a long time, and I actually thought these paintings, when I started working in this direction, would have a lot more of the line would be much more present in the paintings than they ended up being. So the paintings have tended to be, even bodies of work before this, more tranquil, more kind of open-ended. And at the same time, I'd be doing these atmospheric paintings on other days. I was doing these like really fast. So there was a part of me that I felt needed to be expressed. Well, there's multiple parts that I needed to express. And the process and materials to get that out were very different. So drawing is very physical, it's very fast, and the lines are not of anything, the lines are of themselves. It is not representing anything other than, well, in this moment. And I can't go back at a later time to make more drawings in the way I made them. They happen they can only happen at the time they are made. And by the time, it may be for a few months, I am drawing in a certain way. And then I seem to have depleted what I needed to get out. And then the gestures change. So, and it's,
Well, I mean, I remember being in your studio, and I don't remember how long ago it was, but you had
years. Yeah.
so many drawings up on the wall, and they were almost like, sometimes they looked like branches, almost like Chinese, like cherry blossoms.
Yeah.
Sometimes they really looked like dance, you know, that they really were dancing. And the way you were talking about your work seems to me dance really comes into it. And that these really are gestures, you know, they're faster, but you can feel you making them, and then rubbing them and scraping them. And I think it's interesting. It's very different from paintings, really. And I also think they're beautiful. Can you say something about the fact that they're diptychs? Like what about the two pieces put together?
Yeah.
You didn't do them together,
Yeah,
right?
No. So this summer I had the idea. So on the wall behind this are drawings from a year ago, which are charcoal. There's a charcoal field, also with white oil pastel, but have a very different character to them. And for many years, I would work on white paper and spend time developing this rich charcoal field, and it was very meditative to do that, and to work up the courage to then go into them with oil pastel. And this summer, I just wanted to do the gestures. It was like, to hell with this beautiful meditative experience for the field. And
well, you mentioned tumult to me. You mentioned tumult.
Tumult, yes. Well, part of it was that, you know, the urgency that comes out in the drawings was the urgency that I was feeling, whether some of it is a response to the chaos of the world, whether some of it was having nothing to do with that, or it was just inner tumult. But I felt this urgency to get to the process of making the lines without all of the preparation. And at first I thought, oh, I'll do black gesso on white paper, and then suddenly I said, oh, maybe there's black paper. What do I have to do all these things? And the way I explore is, I have a 22 by 30 sheet of paper. First I ripped it into eight pieces, and I started drawing that way to see just what that was like. And then I went up to quarter sheets just to see what that was like. And as I began to feel more comfortable that something was happening, so I had about 10 22 by 30 sheets that I ripped, because I knew I wanted that vertical format, and I didn't feel ready to do a full sheet. And once I start on something and it feels good, they happen really fast, and a lot of drawings in an afternoon. I mean, a lot. It's just because I basically can't stop once I get started. I can knock myself out, physically. So I had probably 15, 16 of these half sheets hanging on the wall of the studio, and there were a number of them that had this type of mark, and then most of them had a different type of gesture. They're not in the show. But I started moving them around to get the ones with these kinds of gestures near each other, because they were scattered all over the wall. And as I moved them around, when these two were next to each other, they went, wow, how'd that happen? And because each one, the way each piece, the way a drawing starts, all I know is where the first, like what edge, whether it's going to start at an edge or going to start somewhere in the middle, or is it going across, like all I know is that first sensation, and then I just have to respond to it. So, and I don't know which one I did first, but I did one of these, and then I said, that came in, maybe there were a few that came in from the right side, and I was trying to see how they felt. And I said, oh, what would it be like if it came from the top? Or what would it be like if it came from the other edge? And I started moving things around, and these came together, but I knew that it had to be, so I knew it was a diptych, I knew they belonged together, but it had to be with a space, because that was the way they were made, it was separately. And I think it's also to undermine the notion that this is one thing.
They're like pages in a book. I can imagine these in a book.
Yeah.
And you have the binding in the center.
Yeah.
Also, I like the tangles, the kind of scribbling aspect. And then on the other side, those drawings are kind of different. So I hope everybody, of course, will go in there and look if you haven't seen them already. But they have almost a sense of deeper space.
Yeah, that's because the field has been manipulated. Yeah.
They're very interesting.
Yeah, there in those drawings,
in some ways they're more like the paintings.
Yeah, I think they're closer because there's an interaction between the lines and what I'm calling the field, more of a conversation, where these drawings, even when I scrape parts of it off, and it just is the lines. And so to me that eliminates any pretense of it being a drawing of something, or drawing that's trying to evoke something. The lines are of themselves. They are, and I don't want to say they're of me, but
yeah,
it's some part of me that.
But they feel that way, they feel that way, visceral and direct, and, it feel your hand, and that's the way that you
I'm very excited by this direction, and I'm saying direction advisedly because there are a few more that I've done since these, and I never know if the next time I'm in front of a piece of paper, I don't know if there are going to be more of these or it will be, oh, I don't know how to do that now. And that's what I'm saying, they're very much of a particular moment, and
what was the
when you're
title
done, you're
that you
done.
gave to the drawings versus the title of the paintings?
So the paintings are called, the series is
Unseen
called
Voices.
Unseen Voices. The drawings and work from both here and the ones behind it are the same series. The drawings are called Voices in the Stream. So, I mean, I don't know what that means.
Well, I think you've said a great deal, and of course you're saying it all in your work, so, should we let people ask questions?
Sure.
Does
Sure.
anybody have a question?
Yeah.
Yes, Nancy.
Hello. You know, I see them differently, but I also see a real link between them. And I guess my question is, I see some of the gesture that's kind of lesser in these, or more hidden, or more subtle. And so I understand that maybe you did this series after these, or during, or?
Same time. Same time, but in different places. So I spend a lot of weekends in the Hudson Valley, and that's where I draw. And because I'm basically working in a bedroom, a small bedroom that is ill-suited for a studio, and I don't generally do a lot of drawing in the city because for a long time I was using a lot of charcoal, and I also work out of an apartment in the city, small room, so I don't have the space to do both in the same space at the same time. So, you know, the paintings are work that was done over a 2-year period. The drawings, as I said, these are from late July. This was the last work I did before I said, you know, gotta stop for the show. So they're not, I don't see them both when I'm working on something. I don't have any drawings hanging in the studio when I'm painting, and I don't have any paintings where I do the drawings. And
I mean, I'm just observationally speaking, it's sort of like interesting that the drawings have this kind of edgy, almost city-like energy, where the paintings have, you know, a very pastoral sort of country feeling. And you're making the paintings in the city and the drawings in the country. It's just kind of an interesting yin-yang going on.
yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, in a way, it's like the painters who used to go out into nature, right? Maybe do some sketches, whatever,
Right.
and then come back to the studio and create those incredible landscapes in the
Yeah.
studio, which are,
Yeah, very, very.
Yeah,
Very
and
nice.
you know,
I
maybe you're just
never,
carrying the feeling with you.
I never sketch outdoors. I don't do sketches of nature. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, I attempted to do some plein air painting, and it was not for me. That's all I can say, it was not for me. So, I guess I just see what's going on. Of course, there are connections. It's one person. But that it's kind of the inner, it's not that I'm in a constant state of tumult, but there is this energy. So I dance a lot when I'm in the studio where no one can see me. And I'd say I dance like pretty wildly. So it's kind of like the dancing is like that. It's not, it's not flowy. It's kind of wild. It's my way of literally shaking up my body if I get stuck with something. I can't, if I'm stuck, meditation does not work. It's like, but moving is kind of what gets me going.
I was gonna say, I was struck by, you said you were while you were exercising and looking out the window, that's it, or meditating, there are different states of mind when we're exercising and meditating. So I mean, I think it relates to the physicality of your work. It's a state of being bodily, that's we shift into when you're painting too, and I think you brought it in, you know, what do you think about your own physicality? I mean, I really see it as coming from a body, movement in your body.
Yeah,
It's not trying to escape exercise. You know, we don't want to exercise sometimes, and they, you know, or meditate, you don't want, it's sort of, we resist, and then we go into it.
yeah. So I think the kind of exercising and sort of looking out there is because, of course, it's a lot nicer out there watching the wind and the trees while you're like having kind of an Olympic
conflict. But we get into a state, a shifting state that is takes us to a different place.
Yes.
A energy, vibration. You may be feeling it in your body, and it's a combat in a way.
At times, yeah. And I think, you know, part of it is kind of a yearning to achieve, for me, the sensation of wonder and awe and escape. But in here, it's saying, not so fast. There's all this stuff going on. So it's kind of needing, wanting, and I don't see these as tranquil, but needing something bigger than me, while recognizing there's also this, this tumult out there too. It's not, you know, if you think of the last body of work, which was all the soft, atmospheric, just kind of, you know, very, yeah.
So, for me, these two drawings have a certain formal dynamism that I find really compelling. And you're making some choices, and I don't think you quite answered Emily's question. I remember speaking to you about, 6-8 months ago, and you were trying to articulate where you were going with the drawings, and I felt your struggle, but it was strong. And the choice to juxtapose these into a diptych, I think, is very, very vital. I mean, I'm aware, for instance, of the edge of the paper on the bottoms and the top, and the crisper edges on the sides, and then really how crisp the middle white delineation is. And then you can choice, like 1 3/4 or 2 inches of edge, and that's critical too. And the kind of looping gesture, especially on the one on the left, where I feel like the line is going out and looping and coming back. I mean, it's really strong. And I'll just say that I'm reminded of, because I hadn't seen them in a long time. This is about a year ago. I was in Washington, in the East Wing of the National, up in the tower where Rothko is, and Barnett Newman. And for me, I can forget about Newman until I get into that room and sit down with Stations of the Cross, and then that kind of sublime comes back to me, and just the formal decisions that are made very, very exquisitely. And I don't think there are 12 paintings. I can't remember exactly the number, but anyway, I wonder. And of course, I see a little bit of Twombly here. I'm just kind of curious where you situate any of this thinking as you think about nature, as you think more formally about these particular drawings with the larger modernist canon, let's say.
Oh gosh.
Well, Or do you? I mean,
I kind of am flummoxed by that because I don't sort of situate myself or my work except in myself. You know, have I, you know, do I look at a lot of things? You know, of course, but it's, as with the little bits of dark edges, whether they're shadows or something, there are certain things with proportion, geometry, spacing that have always mattered to me, and I don't know where they come from or what they signify, except I know when something feels the rightness of it when I find it. And it can't be, you know, if you move, so when I was at the framer to talk about having these mounted, and we were looking at how far apart they should be, and she wanted to measure it, and I said, you know, it's just, I'll tell you
When you get there.
when you get there. Oh no, that's too far, and it might have been a 32nd of an inch. So it just kind of feels right, or it doesn't. But that's not really answering your question. But
great decisions that you've made to intuitively.
yeah, I don't know where so I'm not thinking of it in the context of other people's work, or other periods of work, styles of work. It just, I shouldn't say just, it is what it is. And I was looking and mesmerized, of course, by Bryce Martin's work, well, going way back before he started working with the lines and the Cold Mountain stuff, but I still spend a lot of time looking at, so with Bryce Martin's individual drawings in books. I don't have any to look at of the original, but well, he'll work in a series, small drawings, ink on paper, and I'd be looking back and forth, because if you, at a quick glance, you say, oh, well, you know, it's always 5 columns across, and it's going like this, but I would always be looking and noticing the subtle changes and how much impact they had on my experience of looking, and the spacing between things, and I couldn't articulate why they felt a certain way to me, but just very aware that these small things have enormous significance in how we experience them. And when I'm working, if something keeps saying, not quite, and I don't know what will be right, but if it keeps saying, not there, then I have to keep going. Because when do you stop? With any, that's a perennial question for all this, but with the drawings, because once I stop, I have stopped. I do, the drawings get done in that short period of time, and that's it, I don't go back. So I have to trust that whatever I'm working on will so clearly tell me when I need to stop, that if I don't go, well, there it is, then I have to keep going. But with the drawings, I can't keep going, because if you go, it's not like painting, as you know. With the painting, I can rework work. I'll never regain something from an earlier layer, but there's always more I could do to bring something, maybe a different something, but to bring that out. With these drawings,
It's almost like a photo, like it's filmic or something. It's like what a photographer would do. And if you had this whole room, it's like a massive tumbleweed or whatever, but it's like, it's the same, but it's changing, and there's that
Yeah, more
lapse
sequence.
of time
Yeah.
where it's morphed, or so.
I think it's also like light, I mean, the black and the white, but the white becomes light, so that, I think that also relates to photography.
Photo booth.
There's a lot of time built into your work. It's like these are short, they're like songs, they're like verses. And these are very meditative. They're very, your description of the process of taking perhaps years to create one of these paintings. And that's a deep meditation right there. I mean, people talk about meditation as if it's this thing, like sitting on a cushion for 12 hours.
no. Well, it is for some people.
I think in a lot of ways painting is one
Yeah.
of the deepest meditations because you really have to stay with something and be with it for hours. It's like recently the newspaper's been doing this thing like, immersive viewing. Try to look at this painting for 10 minutes. It's like, well, welcome to our world. We spend days and months and years.
Right, and you spend 5 minutes and then you sit
Yeah.
for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And you walk out, and you sit for 2 hours, and you kind of, and you walk out, get something to eat, and you come in, oh!
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I think meditators can learn something famous for
John has a question.
Yeah.
This is great. I'm very curious, as you said, that you don't know what's going to happen, right? Which I understand. So at what point, how do you determine the size that you're working on, or the shape of what you're working on? Like because you start with a surface, which has a definition.
Yes.
So I'm curious how you come to that size or shape is what I think of it.
Stumbling around, I literally, so the sense of, and I appreciate that question because it's something that is, I never know. It's part of that unknowing. What I have been learning through the process of doing this series of paintings is how, I don't know if it's a how or so much, that I want to be playing with scale. And what I have started to understand about my process is that for a very long time, a lot of the underlayers of many of these paintings, I was kind of too far. Somehow I was too distant from whatever it is I was trying to do, and that when I realized that I needed to somehow be closer, I don't know if this makes sense, but the shape or how much movement, how much is defined or not, is tied to, again, when I say how close, that word doesn't quite land right, but the scale of what I'm trying to create. Does that make any sense?
I mean, right, but since once the surface is determined, I don't even know the right word, it's not determined, but that's fixed.
Yes,
anyway.
the
So
proportions and
the relation of the unknown, and at some point, the decision is made about the space in which you're going to work. That's almost what it's like. And I think that's where vantage point sort of comes in because you're in relation to a space.
Yes.
So I'm curious how you determine that. And this,
I don't know if this really addresses that, but what I do with all of my paintings is I rotate them. Like I'll work for a while and I'll turn it like every which way because I begin to notice things, particularly areas that aren't working. I become so absorbed in one aspect of what I'm doing and I lose track, you know. So I think what you're talking about is more on a compositional.
no, I'm actually thinking of the initial determination about what size you.
It's what I have around. And so the proportions of, I mean, if someone were to actually mathematically, I think they're almost all, this is 24 by 21, that's somewhat smaller, but this proportion is something that is in so much of my work, close to that, and so the painting on that end wall there, 33 by 28, it's basically the same proportion. There's something about that proportion that feels good to me. These verticals, so I custom order all my panels, because standard panels, I just feel too boxed in by the proportions that they're in. So I'm like that sensibility of spacing and proportions is just something in me that I'm stuck with it. So
That makes sense.
So for those, to figure out before I order those panels, those are 40 by 24, I was looking at other paintings and kind of cropping bits in different proportions to kind of get a sense, even though the paintings I was sort of cropping were completely different, but I was looking for what felt right to me in my body as the proportions I want to work on. But there are paintings, there are some paintings that at a certain point, not those, but there are other ones that were in a completely different orientation, and I worked on them in a different orientation for many months. And then I turned them and I went, oh, would you look at that? And something that I've been struggling with, just, it's not that it was done after I turned it, but it just felt, it felt like that's what it needed to be.
Well, it's continuous with everything else you've said. No, I mean, the rightness of things, and it's that's the mystery to me.
It's a complete mystery. It's a complete mystery, except when it happened, like when it doesn't feel right, you know it, and then when it happens, it's extraordinary. It's like, how did that happen? Who did that? Like, where did it come from?
I feel like the edges that Emily was talking about earlier, that we see in some of them, not all of them, but that is in some ways, for me at least, an acknowledgement of what you were just talking about in terms of the proportions and just the acknowledgement of the object as a painting, and that you're comfortable with that space.
So kind of defining it by adding that a little bit, that, so like that this does not go on and on and on, or at least that edge.
And you're playing with the proportion.
Yeah, it's like we'll
I
see
feel completely
the
different.
peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It's almost like a peek behind the curtain. It's like, this is not what you think it is.
Yes,
Right.
yes, that's it,
Yeah.
that's it. It's like, don't be fooled, because
It's like the movie The Truman
there's
Show.
something else.
It's a real
I feel it's very different, especially when you talk so much about your own being interacting with the world, right? When I see the geographic line, I've been line there and the lines here, I connect them. No, for me it feels a lot that this line is your body. And in these drawings, you are showing something that is inside you, that is coming from inside. And here, you are noticing that you are there, absorbing the world from what you expressed, right? And it's wonderful.
Thank you. I love that because, yes, this is very much inner, reflection of inner, and this is more external. And noticing that. I like that framing of it. Thank you.
Speaking of frames, speaking of frames,
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for being here.